yeah, it was a rough time, and not something I expected from the year. This is essentially my dream to be doing
Yeah.
this, and certainly in the middle of it, it was not a dream. It was more of a nightmare, and
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to go home and not do it anymore.
This podcast is brought to you by Tri-Velo Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. I'm your host, Jordan Donnelly, and on my left is former Australian Ironman Champion and head coach of Tri-Velo Coaching, Gerard Donnelly. Trekky, welcome back to another episode. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's been a big season for me, obviously, so I'm keen to recap it with you guys after we chatted about it before it all kind of happened and went down. So yeah.
Yeah, well, let's dive straight into it because, we spoke to you at the start of the season on this podcast, and then you guys spoke a few times throughout the season on the Alt Route podcast and gave some updates. And you had a wide range of results. You were very excited at the start of the season for what was to come. You felt like you were in good form. You changed coaches, so a lot has happened. So can you start with a bit of a overview of the season? Give us a bit of a recap. How do you judge the season, and what are your reflections right now?
Yeah, I mean, it was. How do I say, up and down the season, I would refer to it as. I mean, like you say, when we started, I was really excited, and I kind of changed coaches midway through the summer. Once I knew I was doing the American series, the Lifetime Grand Prix, and wanted to step up and go to a new level so I could compete at the front, not only just take on the races, but I wanted to be in the front. And it went quite well. I mean, that summer training period was really good. And, I felt like I did that sea odd around the first one. We spoke the night before that, I think. And that was pretty early in my training phase. And I was really happy. I think I was like 6 in the Grand Prix points there, which was pretty solid, like a good start. And yeah, so that was the building phase, and I was confident with the rest to come, and then did a huge block for Unbound, the really long race in our season, which also went really well, and I think I got back over there in really good shape for that, and then had a mechanical in the race with the mud and stuff that Nick and I have spoken about as well, and then I think that's kind of where it went wrong for me. Like I had the frustration of that poor result in the second round. Went to altitude the day after that because the next few races are at altitude for us. And literally on the Monday got stuck into, some big hours for the next few weeks. And then I pretty much trained myself into a hole, which I've never done before. And I can only attribute that to the altitude and obviously doing too much. And yeah, it was hard to kind of convey these feelings to my coach at the time, who was in Spain, and he's a great coach, does a really good job. But in terms of like that communication breakdown, I think it was just, like I say, hard to kind of communicate how I was feeling, and I typically, I guess, overdo it or at least do what's prescribed, even if I'm not feeling so great or that sort of thing, and it just worked against me, and I was absolutely creeping by the midpoint of the year, more than I ever have before, and it was, like I spoke about with Nick, like this is the most focus I've put into my cycling in 20 years, say, and I was having some of the worst feelings on the bike I've ever had, which is pretty crazy to think. So it was a matter of like trying to get out of that hole, and had some really poor results in the middle of the season. Fortunately, we can drop a couple of races out of the 7. So I was, by the skin of my teeth, kind of just hanging in there. And I just had to trust myself. And in the end, I ended up, kind of separating from that coach and just kind of going back to my roots of what I kind of know about myself and what I've always done. And went back to my old coach, Ben Hill, and we managed to salvage like some pretty good results towards the end of the season, which, to be honest, it's shaped the next couple of years of my life, I would say.
Wow.
Just the fact that I held strong through there and came back because if I hadn't had the results at the end, I wouldn't be going back next year, for sure. And yeah, I mean, who knows what happens next year? But like, yeah, it's pretty crazy how it all turned around, and yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself that I was able to like stick with it and turn it around and just trust my instinct a bit, right? Like I've done this a long time, and that's a really hard thing to do, I find, and yeah, I'm proud that I was able to do that, and it paid off in the end, which I honestly did not think I was going to get back to that level this year and compete with those guys, and in the end I ended up beating all the Grand Prix guys in the last race and second in the race itself. So yeah, it was an up and down season.
There's heaps in that. I really want to dive into the specifics of that period where it really went downhill, because it's just so, one, it's fascinating, but two, it's so necessary for us to learn as age groupers and athletes, because people do that. So talk us through that process. How did that start, and what was the specifics around the training and the volume that you were doing to get you into that hole compared to normal? And in hindsight, was it just volume, or was it a combination of volume and altitude, like you said? Can you give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, I think what happened was I did these huge training weeks back home after our first round sea otter. We had about 6 weeks until Unbound, and I had an easy week after sea otter and travelled home, which was fine. And then I got really stuck into it back here, which you have to do. I mean, we're doing a race that's 10 hours long, so you have to do that volume. And obviously you need to do that like kind of fatigued endurance work, like fatigue resistance and stuff, which I was doing a lot of and enjoying it, and also really starting to move well towards the end of that block, like a month or so. You know, I was doing like 8-9 hour rides. There was the last week I think I did three like 9 or 10 hour rides in this week. And with efforts in the end, like in the last part and stuff, which is pretty gnarly to think. And I think at that point I was just on the edge of doing too much, but I was still hanging on to it and still going well. And the last one I did, I nailed, and was even blowing myself away, the numbers I was doing in this final hour of 9 hours or whatever, which is great. And I think that's the type of training you need to do, and I'll stick with something like that next year. But what happened was that the fatigue from that is retained, right? Whether you do the race, whether you win the race, whether you get like 100 Ks in or bloody 16 Ks in like I did and have a mechanical. And I rode to like the first feed in my 11 tooth chain ring, and you know, I was just frustrated with the day and how it all planned out, and which doesn't really matter so much. Like the race is the race, but if you've done that work in the training, like 3 or 4 weeks of 25 hours plus 30-hour weeks, you just need to recover from that anyway. Like whether you do the race or not, it's sort of like that block of training. You really need to focus on recovering from that. And I think just with the frustration of the race, I was straight under my coach, and the next race we had was a high altitude like climbing race, and I was just really eager to make amends for what had happened that day in the second round at Unbound, and you know, we started doing more of these longer fatigued rides with efforts in the final part, but also with the factor of altitude, which coming from Australia, I mean, I've raced at altitude before in Europe and stuff, but it's not the same as doing, you know, I was living at altitude and doing 7-hour training rides or 6-hour training rides with intervals and stuff. That takes a proper toll, and that's, you know, that's like races, you know, that's like a big race, and I'm doing that a couple times a week. So I think, yeah, it's something I really need to work on for next year. And I think, you know, even say if I just flew from Oz to the altitude race like Leadville or something, I think just my base fitness level without any altitude preparation or training, I would be better than what I was this year, just from that hole that I got into. So, yeah, I think that's what it came down to, like just doing that Unbound training block, which has to be done, but you also need to really consider recovering from that. Yeah.
It's such a sliding door moment too, Trekky, that we kind of spoke about before. As much as you're going into the Lifetime series and you think of it as a whole, Unbound was definitely your A race and one that you thought suited you so well. And I mean, if you had a result there, you're probably pretty stoked. You take the time to recover and you don't fall into that hole. And something happens out of your control, and the athlete mentality is, I'll just put that one past me. I'll focus on the next race. And that may be where that communication with your the coach and that barrier there may have affected that also, not being able to properly communicate that and being like, irrespective of the race not going the way that it planned, you still did that massive load. Let's pare it back a bit and reload again. So just something that out of your control to have such an impact on your season, I think is a great lesson to everyone and all athletes to be able to step back and have that bit of perspective or communication with their coach.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's paramount to, and especially in a series like we're doing, like we don't have just 2 or 3 races a year, it's like, it's a series and every race kind of counts. And, it took 3 races out of my series basically, so it's a hard pill to swallow when you get to that point, because it's not an instant recovery. Like you can't just take a week off and be flying again. It's like you have to rebuild and take it slowly, and that's what I did. And yeah, I mean, like I say, I was really proud of myself and pleased that I got out of that kind of spot, because like I say, in many, many years of doing this, I've never had that happen. Like I put so much into it that it was too much, and in the end it fell in a heap, and I had to kind of rebuild. But like I say, go back to my roots and go listen to your body, which is something I'm really not good at doing. I'm way better at reading my training schedule, and I'm really not good at listening to my body, I don't think, which it seems strange to be this far down the track and still have that struggle, but I think a lot of people do. And I'm way better at just reading my program and going and giving it a crack and to the best that I can, and I think pretty successfully usually. But when you're in that spot, that's not the solution. You have to just listen to what your body's saying, and if you can't perform at 60% of what you normally would, or 50%, then that's a problem, and you need to stop it there and rewind and reassess for sure.
There's so many cool lessons in this, and I really want to focus on the recovery side, because I think that it's so important for so many athletes to understand and get your perspective on. We happened to speak to Dill Johnson at the end of his season last year, and he had the same kind of sentiment, that he just felt completely overworked and he was just flat by the end of the season. And he was thinking himself, and he commented on the podcast about what he would change for next year. And he just said the relentless races and the relentless training sessions he had to do for the races just got to him, and he was completely cooked by the end. Are you finding that a lot of the guys and girls in the series are having the same sort of sentiment and are getting completely overcooked? Is it just a scheduling thing? It's just the nature of the event that you have to be that prepared. Are you seeing that kind of pattern among a lot of other athletes?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the Americans typically have like a very structured off season, and they hang it up in October. I think even the Grand Prix runs a little bit longer than they'd like, into the end of October. Kind of the vibe I kind of get from the field is that they're kind of tired by that point, and which for me it's kind of okay, even though I didn't manage the mid part well, but that wasn't just I wasn't tired from racing. It was just how it went with the altitude, etc. But for me, it's like that. There's almost an advantage that it runs quite long, because in the past I've mountain biked through the winter and stage races and this and that, and then coming into the summer, I'm doing the road racing and road nats and stuff. So to be going kind of year round is not so foreign to me. So it's the longer, if we were racing, if we had a couple of more rounds, in November, I wouldn't have been mad about it, because I was
You're going to form.
I was going well, and it's not such a stretch for me to go that long, and I think, but for sure, like you see the ebbs and flows of people within the series that, like Alexei at the first race, Sea Otter, he was way back, not going well at all, but then come the midpoint, he's like one of the guys winning the races and right in the front, and so it is a long season for sure. And I mean, it's not like the races we're doing, each one pretty much, apart from the short Schwalmingen race, they're big events, right? Like taking proper tolls on bodies, really long races, hard, like altitude climbing, all this. So for sure, it's not like the small races that you're able to, bounce back from week on week. It's like, it takes a toll, and everyone's kind of chucking extra events in between the Grand Prix rounds for sure. I was as well. But yeah, I mean, like I say, for me, it's not so foreign to be going. Well, at least to have to, manage that and over a long period of time and manage your shape, come down and up when you need to, and I guess rest. But I mean, yeah, in terms of learning, I've learned a lot this year, more than I have ever, and to kind of come out of it with all those lessons and also with some success, it's like, yeah, it's a good year for me.
Keep diving into it. So in terms of learnings, I want to start with a really specific question. What would you change recovery-wise to avoid that hole? I mean, how do you get that balance right between the workload that's required and the races, and then obviously your racing schedule changed? And what if you had to change something, what would you change to get that recovery right?
Yeah, I think for me next year, I've looked at probably I'll do the first 2 rounds with a pretty good focus. Like I think from road nats, I can take a small break or do the Adelaide gravel race and then take a small break and build really strong into April. Our first round is Sea Otter again. And then do the same thing, come home and do an unbound prep block, do that race. And then I'm looking at maybe skipping the next one, which is the Crusher race, for 2 reasons. Like we're talking about the manage that load. Also, I'm going to be traveling back and forward a bit more this year. And I just think it's just not a race for me. Like I think it's a bit of a, risk to keep the training going from there and hit that one as hard as I can, when I think it's probably not a race that I'm going to, hang on to in terms of points. And then get going for the last 3 or 4 is my plan and my learnings in terms of that recovery. Like I think you can afford to drop one race just through your kind of schedule management, and then obviously there's another one to drop for a mechanical or whatnot that may happen and may come about.
Trekky, I was pretty intrigued to see you announce that you're having another crack at road nats. Just with the way that now your season unfolds, it's kind of almost like a world tour rider, right? With a lot of your races throughout the middle of the year, and then traditionally for them, road nationals is kind of pretty hard because they've had to have a break. They've only really just started coming back out. So what's your intentions for nationals and the new SBT gravel race in Adelaide? Is it to be that you'll be in top form, or is it more using that as a kind of a bit of a lead in, or what are your expectations around those and your plans?
Yeah, I mean, I think being at Buninyong is, become part of my brand, I guess, a little bit. And I really love it. And it's the last one there for, the foreseeable future. So yeah, for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer to get in shape and get down there. In terms of expectations, I think, like you say, it's a challenge now. Like I only took, let's call it just a week and a half off after Big Sugar, our last race in the series. And started again, a week and a half later, training again. And a lot of the Americans haven't even touched it. They're just starting to touch their bike now, which is a month. So yeah, it's challenging, and I for the first time kind of felt pretty fatigued about starting to train hard again, like so soon. Like it with so much focus on this year, and you know, like you say, I mean, this is a normal thing for World Tour guys. It's not so crazy, but for me, like to have so much focus on my training and my shape throughout the year, like literally every day, it's something you're striving for and to do the best job at, and it becomes a bit tiring by that period. 6 or 8 months in, it's like, well, probably more, 10 months. Say it's you start the work in for sure in January for April and the rest of the year. So yeah, it was tiring to come and think I had to start doing it again, but in the past, I also think I've kind of gone too long out from nationals. So starting, early October, with the base for nationals, and then starting my like simulation workouts, maybe 6 weeks out, I think has been possibly too long in the past. And I've done some rides, like I do this simulation sessions, and the last year for sure, like 3 weeks before the race, I was absolutely flying and going the best I've ever gone in this simulation session. And then by the race, I think I was actually a bit overdone. So yeah, for me, it's like a pretty of a forced, change up in the prep. And I'll just have a shorter period to get ready for it. But I think, I mean, I'll struggle to go to Buninyong without wanting to do the best job I can. And like I say, I feel like it's a bit of my brand to be there and be kind of near the front if I can. And I'll put a focus on it for sure. It's like a cool race, and I always want to do well there. And like I say, the last one there, it's it's important. And then on to that's good because I want to be going well for the Adelaide gravel race, the new one that is come on board, and it's kind of nationals kind of forces me to get ready for that as well, and then I'll come back down a bit after that.
It's a really awesome lesson here for the listeners, especially any Ironman or endurance athletes, how much emphasis you put on the simulation sessions. And I mean, doing 3, 8, 9, 10-hour rides in a week is just out of control. For a lot of Ironman athletes, building up to a 5 or 6 hour or 7 hour kind of simulation day is the max they'll ever do. So it's really encouraging to see how much you're willing to push it, albeit being a professional athlete. One, what is your recovery from those rides? What are you doing specifically? Are you having a complete day off the day after, a couple of days after? I think this is really important for people to know when they're doing their own kind of simulation sessions akin to their event.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And those unbound kind of simulation rides are something else. And my learning from this year is that I wasn't resting enough after days like that. That with the coach I had at the time, it was like that was the kind of endurance simulation, although it had pretty high intensity intervals towards the end. And then the next day we might have like kind of more VO2 workouts and stuff, or in the days to follow, which is just too much, like say you did like a any kind of 6 or 7, 8 hour training ride, regardless of what you did within that ride. That's fatiguing, and really doesn't matter how. I mean, the pace, even like if you're sitting on a bike for that long, it's like that's mentally and physically fatiguing, and that can't be underestimated for sure. So yeah, my learnings are that they're required, like those long simulation days, and the race kind of efforts towards the end, fatigued. I definitely think they're required, but yeah, like you say, and that's something I think I did incorrectly, is not put enough emphasis on recovery in the days after. Like you wouldn't do an Ironman and then go and train the next day. Like this is not what you do. Or, you probably have a week off or whatever. So without going, obviously your simulations don't need to completely simulate the effort of a race, but yeah, it's important to be mindful, and it's a good learning that I've come across this year and will carry into next year for sure.
It's such a great example of a season and how to manage a season. You literally went through such an extreme range of ups and downs. And Nick, I actually want to throw this to you and say, watching Trekky and watching his results, what were you thinking watching that happen? And then how did you see the whole turnaround and the back end as a cyclist and coach yourself? What was your perspective watching from the outside?
It was really interesting. I've always kind of watched Trekky from afar, and then it's only kind of since we started doing the podcast together that we spent a bit more time together and learn a bit more about Trekky and get to know him. I guess from the outside, I've kind of always looked at Trekky that's always performing well, doesn't really ever seem to have any issues, or ups and downs, always super consistent, mentally very strong. And then doing some of the episodes with Trekky throughout the year, you could really tell even mentally that he was a bit down as well as physically. So that was really interesting to see, and almost kind of humanizes people in a way, because you put up these elite athletes on a pedestal and think that everything's always going well for them or everything's perfect with training or whatever. But to be over in America without your family, struggling with races, training, I think it's really probably important just for the everyday athlete to see that no matter what level you are, you go through ups and downs. But I guess Trekky showed the class of athlete that he is to be able to turn things around. And I don't think we can underestimate just how good the athletes are in America doing the gravel. Like, you've got world tour riders over there. We've always spoken about Keegan Swenson, but like, these guys are like out of control. And for him to get the results he did on the back end of the year, Trekky probably starts to get the kudos now that he deserves. It's not quite the depth here in Australia, maybe across mountain bike and definitely gravel. But when you see Trekky starting to compete against these guys, I think now he's starting to get, as I said, the kudos that he kind of deserves.
It's such an awesome point. Talk us through, Trekky, that tough period when it wasn't going your way. You mentioned how it started to get you down, and Nick just pointed that out then to go, well, shit, it's not always going according to plan. And for someone that's probably used to getting consistent good results, to go through that lull, how is that mentally on you? How did you get through that taxing period? And you're obviously super proud, as you've mentioned, that it's probably one of the proudest parts of the year that you got through it. But talk us through that lull period. What was that like?
Yeah, it was tough, and it was actually nice to talk to Nick in those. Probably in the depths of it, to be honest. And it's, like I say, it's not something I've really had to deal with so much. But it just it came about, and it takes a while. Like, I guess you're in denial for a bit about how you're feeling, and you just try each session to turn it around, I guess, and get the feelings back. But when you've been at it so long, like, it just came a time where I was like, you know what? No, I know this is not right. I know I can be better than this, and I have been for many, many years, and I need to change something because this is not working. Like, just trying again. So I guess it was that realization that, and I've had a lot of good people in my corner that I was bouncing all this off, which is really helpful. And even if they're not a qualified person or whatever, I think if you're just bouncing ideas off someone, maybe you get that different perspective, and just get reassured that you may be listening to your body, and it might be correct, and it might be the right thing to do. And in the end, I was glad that I was able to do that. And I think like, it's I don't know. I always like to err on the side of doing too much or being the hard man or whatever, like that kind of perspective, which I think is important and probably gets me to where I can be or where I've got to. But at the same time, like, once you start to tip over that edge, it's like you have to kind of let go of that and trust your feelings. So it was a rough time, and not something I expected from the year. This is essentially my dream to be doing this, and certainly in the middle of it, it was not a dream. It was more of a nightmare, and I wanted to go home and not do it anymore. But I don't know, like, once I to have those results in the last part of the season, like each time I crossed the line, I was just in a bit of shock that I'd got to that point from where I was, like I was doing these interval sessions that were just embarrassing almost, and it was just completely wasting my time, and
Yeah.
so to have that feeling in the legs and like have power in the legs again and be able to like contest for the win and stuff, it's like, I don't know, it was really just pleasing and almost unbelievable for me.
Trekky, I think like you probably went over there with not like overly confident. I think you knew the caliber of the athletes that were over there and that it was not going to be easy by any means. But I think whatever race that you go into, you're there to compete and you have the confidence that you're going to be there at the top end. Did you ever start to doubt yourself in the middle of the year and think, no, I'm actually not at this level that these guys are?
Oh, for sure. And that was the realization I'd come to. I wasn't even doubting it. I was pretty confident in it. That I wasn't going to get to that level. And when I went over there, like you say, I didn't expect to be at the front, but I worked as hard as I could, and I gathered everything together to kind of have the best chance at compete. Like I say, I got a new coach. I wanted to go to a new level because I knew that these guys like Keegan, etc., they're at another level, and I did, I guess, all I could within my power to try and get there before I went. And yeah, I mean, like I say, in the mid part of the first race was encouraging and like, this is good. But by the mid part of the season, it wasn't a matter of doubting it. I'd almost accepted it, that I wasn't going to be able to race with them, and it was a tough sort of realization. But I don't know. It wasn't that I was thinking at that point, maybe I can get back to them. Maybe I can get. It was a matter of just thinking, I just need to get feeling myself again, basically, and get feeling of power in my legs, and that was what I kind of strived for after that kind of down period. And it wasn't a matter of I can get back and I can win races. It was a matter of like, all right, I'm still doing this. I can't go home. Like, it's not feasible to go home and just pull out now. It's like I've had people hit on this ride, on this journey, supporting me. I just need to kind of, if all I get by the end of the year is some good feelings and maybe some top 10s or whatever, then that would be enough. And I could say that I, dug myself out of that hole and gave it a crack till the end of the series and the end of the trip that I had planned. So, but that faith kind of, got me to the podium and, close to the top step. So, I guess that was a big lesson of mine as well, like mentally and it's a new learning for me to come from that level of low. Like, I've had lows in the past, but for sure with health, etc. But not so much with like overtraining and that sort of thing, and a big form slump. So it was a really nice thing to learn about myself, and it was nice to kind of dive. I mean, while at the time it wasn't so nice, but to come from there and back to success is like, that has a really positive effect going forward on life and racing itself.
Shows how deep you were, that you were literally weighing up the options of how you could get home and whether that was feasible, and you were obviously mentally going through the logistics of, can I actually just throw the towel in here? What was the turning point?
Absolutely.
When did it turn for you, and what were the factors that turned it, do you think?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I did another podcast with Payson about on his one about, and he asked the same question, I think. And so in the midpoint of our series is Leadville, the big 100-mile mountain bike race in Leadville, Colorado, at 3,000 meters plus elevation. And on the way, like I think I took 2 weeks off in the middle of the season, which was due to this like overtraining, this situation that had arisen. And I just had to kind of panic and take 2 weeks off completely. And that was a couple of weeks before Leadville, I think, which is not ideal. And I pretty much thought, look, I'm going to have to kind of throw this race as well. But I'll go and I'll do it. It's only like an hour and a half from where I was living. And at least I'll be fresher than what I have been at the other altitude races. So, yeah, and even on the way out, like, I mean, sometimes the weeks before that, I actually felt okay and like better than I had done, just given that rest. And then, so I had this like tiny minuscule bit of confidence that I would be able to actually get through the race and feel some good feelings. But I mean, even on the way, it's an out and back course, right? So you just, you leave town and then you basically ride, over a couple of pretty decent climbs and then out to, the Columbine, which is like, this huge peak. Maybe it takes like an hour to get up ish. And you just flip it at the top and then send it back down and you go all the way, same way back. So the way out, I actually got dropped from the front on the first main climb, which I think is maybe 20, 30K into the race. I got dropped, from the front group and just, which is a bit of a disaster at that point, because after this climb, it's like flat roads to the bottom of the Columbine. And if you're in the front group, you like get towed along and it's sweet. But I just couldn't hang with them. The breathing and everything was just, an issue. And it's like, I just knew that if I was going to work so hard to stay with them there, like it's a 6-hour race. I need what I can in the back half, and I talked to a lot of people about it actually. It's a famous race, and people know how kind of the toll of the back end of it is. So I just had to let them go there and ride my own kind of race out to Columbine, and then actually with Dylan Johnson, we kind of hit the bottom of it together with maybe the marathon world champ at the time, which was kind of cool. And I knew that Dylan would be doing like a steady pace up the climb. He talks about his watts all the time, and I knew he would have like a set wattage, which he knew he could sustain comfortably. And I was like, I'm just going to keep him, 10 meters in front of him up the climb, and that's what I did. We rode up the climb kind of together pretty much, and it was just like this pace that I just seemed to be able to really comfortably like ride at. Which is the first time I'd felt comfortable for some time on the bike, in a race situation, and not going backwards. I was having these huge explosions, even in races when I thought I'd conserved. I thought I hadn't even fired a shot yet, but then when I went to fire the shot, it was just like lights out, which was really strange. And but this is the first time I was just comfortable and not drifting backwards. I was actually we were passing people and. By the top, I actually was feeling really good, which is so strange. And this is actually the very midpoint in our season, halfway halfway through Leadville, and halfway through the series, and we flip it at the top. And then he was actually on a drop bar, like mountain bike, which is pretty gnarly. And I was like, I'm not going to let him out. Like, well, we descended together basically, and then just jumped on his wheel, and he was motoring home, and we were just passing people. And this was like in my head, this was already a win for me, like to be moving forward at this point in the race. And it was really cool. And I think we passed maybe 10 people from there to the finish, and just finishing strong as like. That was just, the result wasn't that great. I think I was 15th or 14th or something. But for me, that was the turning point. And like I say, it wasn't about the result so much as just like I say, when you are this deep into a career, or what's a good feeling in yourself. And I hadn't had that for a while. And then in Leadville, I was having this feeling towards the end of the race, which was really nice. And that was kind of where it turned around. And then after that, it was a matter of like, okay, I know where I'm at, like fitness wise now. I've got a decent read on that, and then you can comfortably like take the rest when you need to take the rest, because you're not stressed about not doing enough. Like I had a really good read on my fitness there, and then from then it was I'd gone back to my old coach Ben Hill, and he, our discussion was, look, you're not going to get any better from here in terms of like load or training. All you need to do is like peak for the races. So. Yeah, the biggest like stress here is being rested, and you know, we want your form to be like premium on each of the races, and your shape is actually not bad. Like my fitness was good, and it was just a matter of like hitting the races with targets fresh and like ready to race, and feeling good, and it really paid off. And I guess the main lesson is, like, you know, I do a lot of work in the summer,
Yep.
and don't discount that work that you've done. Like, it's going to pay dividends towards the end of your season, or, you know, your target race or whatever. You don't have to keep loading on top of that. Yeah.
It's a great lesson, because I think the mentality is, a lot of the time, is all of a sudden I'm not fit anymore. And it's like,
Yes.
the fitness will never left you, right?
Yep.
A lot of it is the mental space behind it, and is being overtrained and probably just needing to get rid of some of that load. But that is the mentality so often, is oh, I'm not fit anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I was scratching my head going, how am I not fit? You know, I've done
The amount of work
27
you're
hours
doing.
this week at altitude. I've done 25 hours,
Yeah.
you know, with interval, etc., etc. I've done the work. How am I not in shape? You know, that was my biggest sort of question at that time. And the natural response is like, more, do more. Like, you know, you obviously haven't done enough. But as I got, like I say, got to that realization within myself that I was cooked, and you know, then you can start to like reassess and take a step back and look at what you're doing, and really, like, yeah, answer that question, I guess. How am I not fit? Well, you are. You just cooked, and yeah.
It's the way your season unfolded is such an incredible metaphor, and so similar and parallel to how a general gravel race or an endurance race goes down. And Nick, you spoke about this when we were doing a coaching video before the Dirty Warrny, how in the race you just go through so many, you know, trials and tribulations. You go up and down so much, and you really spoke about just expecting that the absolute worst can go wrong, and then riding through it, and then just knowing you're going to have lull periods. It might be a half-hour period. It might be in Trekky. It was half your season. It was a lull period, akin to a race where you
Many
just
hours.
have to get through that. And Nick, I love how you speak about that. And in a 6, 7, 8 hour, 9 hour race, you've just got to get through those periods, and you can come through the back half and shine through again.
Yeah, I mean, I have said that a lot of times, and that is the reality of most races. But I think the difficult thing is actually when you're in those moments. I mean, I can sit here on a podcast and say you just need to work through it, but the reality is when you're in that moment, it's bloody tough as well. And, you know, as Trekky found out throughout the season, and even doing the Dirty Warning recently, like, when you actually get into that moment, you can tell yourself it's a rough time. You just have to work through it, but it's a pretty dark patch, so it's not easy.
Yeah, I guess turning it, Trekky, back half, you had some unbelievable results. Correct me exactly, you got on the podium twice. Talk us through that feeling and those moments.
Yeah, it was good. At so the second last race was in Trinidad, Colorado. The rad gravel, and it was like 170, 180 k's, I think. At some altitude too. Like, I think we topped out at like 2,700 meters or something. So not nothing, but I mean, not the heights of something like Leadville. And yeah, I was just on one of those days, like, and my confidence was building, but I still had this huge cloud of doubt over my body and its ability to be involved in a race, even, you know, like without conking out and exploding. And you know, within that race itself, like, I felt really good. It basically goes out, does a loop with a climb, and then comes back. So the way out's kind of slowish, and the way back is really quick, with a kind of decent climb at the sort of furthest point. But you know, the fast guys kind of were going maybe halfway up this climb, and I knew this is kind of the crux of the race, but I was really having a hard time trusting my body and knowing that I could actually be involved in it. So I kind of just went at this point across to maybe a group of 5 or 6 that had gone, and I left some kind of big names that were surrounded by me, and they were kind of looking around like no one's coming. I've just like closed this gap basically with ease. And at that point, that was like a turning point for me. Like in that race itself, is like, actually, you know what? I think I'm on a good one. And if I'm able to just bridge a gap to these guys who are obviously exceptional riders and climbers, just by myself, and comfortably get there, and then get straight into the work, and push on up the climb. And I think over the top we had only three of us, with Stettner and the other guy I forget, but and Alexei. So there's three of us at the top of this main climb, and at that point I'm like, we dropped a few others, and they came back, but it was just a matter of like trusting myself and trusting my body that I was on a good day, and these kind of poor feelings and moments had left me, and I was able to compete. But still, even in the final, like I probably should have waited for the sprint in that race. There was like some big hills coming back into town, like some big kind of punchy climbs. There's three of them, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not bad in a sprint after that kind of race, and for whatever reason, just lacking confidence, I like attacked on the second last climb where I barely shook them, and that was my bullet, and that was the one bullet I had. And yeah, it's like looking back at it, that was just a really poor decision, and it came from the roots of just not being confident, and not trusting myself that I could compete. But at the same time, like third for me in that race, from where I'd come from, was it blew my mind, and I didn't expect that, and and that was just a confidence thing from there. Like going into the final race, Big Sugar in Bentonville, I knew that race would suit me, and no altitude, punchy climbs all day. However, quite chunky gravel, so there's it's got a real reputation for flat tires and mechanical issues, which I don't know. I didn't seem to be that worried about, like when I pre-rode it. But the thing was, in the race, the speed was so much higher, and in the group of 30 or 40 or 50 riders at speeds that you would ride a road race at with rocks this big, it's a different story. So I guess a little bit of my prep was maybe underdone there, and I punched twice, which wasn't ideal. But at the same thing, like I got this punch up maybe 20 miles into the race. The group was still 50 or so moving real quick. People are trying to get away. The race is on. And for a sec, like it went straight to the rim, and for a second I'm like, that's it, and this is my chance to move up in the overall. I'm thinking for a split second I was like, that's my kind of title fight over, or series fight over. But straight away I seemed to be able to just fix it and get back into it, and really work back towards the front. And I think I was 3 minutes back at one point, and then got back to the front, and I was sort of like, oh, I'm back, and now we can race again. And then it got down to like 5 of us, or 6 maybe, and the best guys in the race, Keegan was there, and the plugs that I'd plugged in my tire had actually come out. And but this is the kind of day I was on. At that point I didn't even care. I just sort of was like, oh, I'll just plug it again, pump it up, and get back. Like it wasn't like which I don't get into that mindset very often. It's only, well, for me at least, certain days or times where you're that confident, or that positive, I guess, to be able to have stuff like that set you back. And then I don't know, your body is just like on one of those days where it just won't be beaten, right? It's just like, not even mentally can you beat me, like in terms of I never felt like I was down and out, which I mean, thousands of times this happens in training and other races where something happens and you just throw the towel in. But like you can't expect to have that mentality. Well, I can't expect to have the mentality every race or every training ride that when stuff goes wrong or whatever, that you just bounce back and you have one of the best rides of your life. That's not something I can do every day, but it's fortunate that it happened on that day, and I was able to kind of get that out of myself.
And what was you feeling after that euphoria? How was it? Relief?
Yeah, it was a strange feeling when I crossed the finish line there. I mean, we had like a 5 or 6 way sprint, and yeah, I kind of hit out kind of early, and I was just waiting for someone to come past me, and no one was coming. You know, Keegan was in the sprint, Alexi, and no one's coming, and I'm just thinking like, holy shit, you know, like, and even in the video, like I was at like kind of in shock of what was happening, that I even sat down in the sprint, and then Toby, the guy who actually wasn't in the Grand Prix, he's like just kept going and won the race. But it was just a really strange feeling to be like, yeah, hit the front and leave those guys behind. And I was just in this weird place, and second there and first in the Grand Prix I just like fell in a heap over my bike at the end, because I just did not expect, you know, to get to that level from where I was, and I but you know, that was the day I was on. I was on such a great day, and even after the second flat, as I'm coming back across this gap, I'm thinking, like, in my head, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go fucking straight past them, and that's going to be my move, and I'm going to go, you know, solo from here. But when I got back there was like all the media cars and the everything was like kind of blocking the road, so I didn't have the chance to do that. But yeah, it was special to be in that mindset on that day, where it was pretty important in terms of points, and I got the maximum points that I could have. So absolutely just chuffed with myself, and yeah, the learnings that I was able to kind of go through, and yeah, it's valuable.
You've had a lot of good results, Trekky. Would you put that right up there with top 5, or even the best result that you've had in your career?
Yeah, I think I probably would. I have to probably put it down as it was at least one of the best, if not their best. Yeah, like and like I say, it's meant that I can go and do it again next year. You know, it's a pretty fickle beast, like sponsorship, and you know, it's expensive to do it from here. And without, like, I mean, unfortunately, it's like results just speak dollars and sponsors and exposure. So it's not unfortunate, but like, you know, they can be hard to come by, especially with someone like Keegan in the races, who seems to you know, mop them all up, which yeah. So in terms of like importance, and you know, and that resilience kind of that I was able to, you know, show, that I have to put that down as one of my best ever. And you know, I had my family there, and it was just like we were flying home the next day. It was just a special way to finish.
I'm interested to know. I mean, sorry, Jordy. It was like a pretty big decision for you, right? You were working full time. You got into the lifetime Grand Prix series, stepped away from work to focus on this, and cycling to essentially become your career at this point. Have you had a chance to step back and put it into perspective that this is going to be viable now for you for at least the next year, given the top 10 do qualify for another spot? So, you know, essentially this could be the next couple of years you do get to live out somewhat, you know, being a pro cyclist, given, you know, when you're a bit younger, that's what you aspired to with the mountain bike. Didn't quite happen, but now here you are living it out.
Yeah, it is funny. And if you had said this to me like even a year ago, that this is where I'd be and this is what I'd be doing, I would have been very surprised. And you know, it was a crazy step to even go and do it. You know, like I've had a decent racing career. I've got a good setup life wise, and you know, we're happy here, and it was all going well. And it's nice to, like, you know, I had a good job and stuff. It's nice to be comfortable in that sense. So what we were doing was kind of getting a bit uncomfortable, which certainly when it wasn't going well, was really uncomfortable. And it was hard to even live out that experience positively, like, because, it wasn't performing. I wasn't, holidaying. There was not much to kind of draw from, in terms of positivity. I was away from my young daughter and wife and all this. So it was a crazy step, and like I say, uncomfortable, but it's paid off. And to be able to do it again, and perhaps the year after, we'll see. But it's going to be year on year for me. Like I say, hopefully I can form some longer term partnerships and make it viable into the years to come. But for sure, next year's kind of sorted, and it's nice to be in that spot. And being a pro is something that, like you say, I hadn't done in my career, essentially. Done a lot of things, but I'd never put that kind of emphasis on my racing as a full-time thing. And it's a funny place to find myself at 32 years old tomorrow.
Oh, is it your birthday tomorrow? That's awesome. Happy birthday. What a way to finish the season with that result. And then you end up 7th overall in the series. Where do you rate that result? Because halfway through the season, we've meant something different to how it felt at the end of the season. Where do you rate 7th place overall? And congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it was sort of like, I think I looked at my, my progression from the kind of midpoint was like, I think I was like 26 or something, 15th, 3rd, and then 1st in the, like, that was my progression in terms of series points in the last like 4 races, which is pretty crazy. And I mean, I think at the low point, maybe I was like 20th or something in the standings. And it is that fickle. Like, if you're running 20th, I mean, you're not coming back, not from Australia, not unless you've got a lot of money and you can make it happen. But I mean, you might come back, but it's difficult. Like, it's really difficult, and it's going to be a passion project. But if you can push into that top 10 and like show yourself and prove yourself, like, it's certainly going to make it easier and more possible. For me, I wasn't set on doing it again and kind of making it as such. That was my goal, like to see if I could grab one of these opportunities, and I knew there's opportunity over there, and that was where I went, and that was what I set out to do. But I wasn't, it wasn't the be all and end all. Like, I can happily just, and it's like I say, way more comfortable just to live here and do the races you enjoy and have a stable job and all this. But hopefully, it's worthwhile, and it's inspiring to my daughter that you can do something crazy, and maybe it pays off, and don't just like settle in and get comfy. It was a crazy thing to do, and a crazy thing to chance to take, but I hope it sort of paid off in the sense that, like, I've got a young daughter, and I hope that she obviously came with me for a part of it and saw what I was up to, and I hope that she takes from it. She's very young, but that you can do something crazy, and not to just sit around it and sort of settle in and take a chance on something. And maybe it's a bit cliche or whatever, but for me, that's kind of what I'd settled into was a matter of steady job, and obviously I've been racing all this time, but it was time that I made a crazy call and left my stable job and business, and I decided that it was our time to do something crazy, and bring them along for the ride. And I hope it's inspired her, and to do whatever she wants to do, and perhaps others maybe. I've had friends that have quit their job and moved to something else that they enjoy more, and especially with, like, a male of my kind of age, I think it's pretty easy to kind of just stay with what you're doing and not branch out and do something you love. Or I never loved being an electrician, but I did it for 11 or more years, and I got to the point where I was just really not enjoying it, and that was something I had to change. And it takes a lot to actually make that call, and people judge you or whatever for going training and doing all this, but it's something that I had to do, and I'm really glad that we made the call, or that I made the call and made them come along.
So I really just want to hear from you. What is the resilience lesson? Because you said that you had a lull period. Nick, you called it and you said it's easy to tell yourself, oh, this is a hard period, just get through it. But what specifically is the lesson here? How did you get through it? What did you do to get through it, to get through that hard part?
Yeah, I think, like Nick was saying, like, it is easy now to sit here and say, oh, just push through to get better. But for me, it was a matter of, trusting and believing in where I've been before and what my body's been capable of before. And I knew that wasn't it, and that if I just hung on and just waited and was patient and took the right steps, talked to the right people, that I could get back to a respectable level. And like I say, just find that feeling again that I knew was inside of me and has been for many, many years. And, that for me is a lesson, talk to people and get people who are going to reassure you that you will get back, or that you will get through. Again, it's cliche, but like, for me, I'd never lived it out. And, I have spoken to a lot of people and told them this story and said that, like, when you get to that point, maybe you never do, but, those struggles where it's tough and you need to kind of just hang tight and ride it out. That was my kind of lesson with it. Just, I don't know. I didn't really have many options. Like, coming home was one of them, but that would have been a proper failure, and I wasn't up for that. So I just had to trust myself and trust my body, and I know I'm a better athlete than what I was and was performing at, and it was something I had to just kind of ride out. And like you say, within endurance sport, that's a thing that happens in every race. Even the guys at the front, they're not feeling their best the whole time generally, but it's a matter of riding that wave of kind of lull of good feeling and getting through it. And like I say, it's cliche, but I think it's a real thing, and I had to live it out. So I'm glad that I did, to be honest.
What an awesome answer. So I want to finish this podcast by talking about our home gravel race, the Dirty Warrny, which is really exciting. We officially partnered with the Dirty Warrny this year. It's a race that has some momentum and getting a bit of popularity around it. And Nick, you touched on the fact that the gravel scene isn't as big here, but we're really pumped about the popularity it's getting and how fun it is. So I'll start with you, Nick. How was your experience with the Dirty Warrny? And you actually ended up finishing 30 seconds behind Trekky. So after all your conversations this year, talk us through the race and your thoughts on it.
It was pretty funny heading into the race, actually, because it was pretty aggressive early on. And Trekky was making a few moves. I was on his wheel the whole time because I knew he was the man to watch. So it was pretty funny developing this relationship throughout the podcast this year, not really knowing each other that well. And then it all culminating in basically currently Australia's biggest gravel race. It was a super tough day. It was a headwind all day. I actually remember Trekky turning around at one point being like, this is going to take like 8.5 hours because the headwind was so strong. And I think last year was like 7 hours 15 or something like that. So conditions were really tough. And I'd actually taken a bit of inspiration out of Trekky's year as such. I guess with gravel racing, I'd kind of usually been in that second group, but always felt like I was good enough to be in the first group. And on the KOM, things split up a lot, and I think there might have been 7, 8 of us. Trekky was there, and Mark O'Brien, Brennan Davids, and the real top gravel racers here in Australia. And I made the split and was in that group. So it was almost like my little mini moment of what Trekky had this year, that culmination of feeling like that you're where you should be. It was a great race for me in terms of my confidence and I'll definitely take that moving forward. Unfortunately, I lost contact on the descent. It was pretty sketchy. It had been graded during the week, so it was super loose, big rocks, and a couple of riders ahead of me just took the wrong line, and subsequently meant a few behind us kind of got caught out. That's the nature of gravel racing, so I kind of faced my own tough period, thinking that I was in the front group. That was the race, and this could be something. And then all of a sudden, you're out of that front group, and you know that you've got 5 hours ahead of you, and that's probably the race done. But yeah, we're through some tough moments throughout that race, but then still salvaged a really good result with a top 10. And I'm a year older than Trekky. Probably won't quit my job just yet, but it's a great confidence booster for me. I guess even with nationals coming up, that not going in that I can win it by any means, but that I'm good enough to get around, which would be a great result in itself.
And Trekky, your experience coming home from America and taking on a gravel race in Oz, the biggest one, as Nick said. Yeah, how'd your day pan out?
Oh, I mean, it was a struggle to get down there, to be honest. By this point, I'm like, pretty done with racing for that. I mean, you don't just get up and do the dirty Warrny. It's like you have to get up at super early, and you have to prep all your stuff, which gets tiring by that point in the year. But at the same token, I wanted to I just had the couple of weeks off, but I still wanted to, and I thought I would actually be better than I was on the day, to be honest. Like, my feeling was not good at all. Still had some strength, obviously, but I think just my mindset was a bit beaten, and like I say, you don't just pedal through the dirty Warrny and win it. Like, you are, it's a tough day out, and guys like Marco and stuff didn't make it any easier. But like I say, I wanted to be there because it's a big race, and it's the premier race. It's the journey from Geelong to Warrnambool. It's cool. It's good roads. And I put my best foot forward that I could, and that I had on the day, to kind of try and repeat last year. But yeah, I think I was just in a bit of a different mind space in terms of competing for the win, and my feeling wasn't as good on the day, and we actually got dropped on the, I guess you'd call it like the second kind of main climb with maybe 100-ish Ks to go, and from there it was just a bit of a death march to the finish. But it was kind of nice to just kind of, I mean, we rode pretty hard until the last little bit, but then I think in the finish part, it's kind of like through the fields and stuff, or the parks or whatever, and we were just like chatting, me and Ollie, about the day or whatever, and we didn't realise that these guys were like storming in behind us. So we had not seen them for some time, and then we crossed the line, and they were literally on our tail. But it was cool to see such close racing. I mean, obviously the winner was way out ahead. That was really impressive. I mean, it's just a cool race, and it's the biggest race we have, and I had to be there and give it my best crack. But it's challenging, that's for sure. I mean, that course in itself is right up there with as hard as it gets in terms of length and the climbing and stuff. You don't typically have that level of climbing. Even just after you do the main climb up into forest, it just rolls on and on and on from there. It's not a matter of getting to forest and downhill to Warrnambool at all. As Nick will tell you, it rolls on, and that's a brutal course. It's harder than a lot of the big races in the US, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't really done a big race like that probably since Unbound 2 years ago, and I had kind of forgotten the toll that it takes on you. Like, I was absolutely smashed by the end of it, and for a good couple of days after. I'm glad I don't have to do 8 of those races throughout the year and do the lifetime. It's bloody tough. So kudos to anyone that tackles it and just completed the day, because it is right up there with one of the most brutal things I think you can do in Oz.
the fact that both of you have said that, and Trekky, you're saying coming back from what you did in America and saying how tough the course was, just shows how tough a race it is. So we're going to wrap up there. It's been a monster episode. Trekky, thank you so much for giving us your insights. The story you've had this year is really inspiring, and the lessons you've shared is just awesome for any endurance athlete. And we can't wait to see how you go next year. Obviously, a lot of learnings. We can't wait to see you give it another crack, especially getting a preview this year into your season and watching it unfold, and now getting a review. We can't wait to see how you go next year. It's really exciting. So thanks for jumping on, mate.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks to the Triathlon team, and bringing people onto my kind of your audience into mine has been nice, and hopefully people can tackle their own endurance sport goals with some little tiny bit of extra inspiration.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see you both racing each other again at Nationals in probably, I think it's 5 or 6 weeks time to the day almost. I think it's 6 weeks to the day. Can't wait to see you lining up together. So Nick, thanks for jumping on as well, mate. Appreciate it. And that's it for this episode. See you on the next one.